After the delivery, my wealthy father wanted to surprise me and showed up at the hospital without warning. But as soon as he saw the modest clothes and baby supplies I had prepared, he asked me directly, "Daughter, was the $7,500 I sent you every month not enough?" I was so stunned I didn't know if my father was joking. I replied, "Dad, I managed with my savings and my work as a freelancer." My answer left him in shock. His face flushed, and just at that moment, my husband and mother-in-law entered the room. I never could have imagined what was about to happen. The smell of disinfectant and the stale air were the first sensations that greeted Zola upon waking. She opened her eyes slowly. The room felt strange, yet at the same time, it conveyed a sense of relief. The pain throughout her body, especially in her lower abdomen, was still sharp. However, that suffering was instantly replaced by an immense peace when she turned her head to the side. Inside, a simple, transparent plastic bassinet lay a small creature, still flushed and wrinkled. Her son. The tears of emotion started flowing again. She touched his tiny cheek with the pad of her index finger. She felt that all the pain of the hours of labor had been rewarded many times over. Zola adjusted the slightly crooked shawl over her shoulders. She had chosen a shared room for 3 people at this county general hospital. Not for lack of options, but because it was the most sensible decision for her and her husband Kwame's financial situation. The room had 4 beds, although at that moment only hers and another in a corner were occupied. A ceiling fan turned slowly, emitting a monotonous squeak, but it was enough to mitigate the heat. She looked at her baby again. A light blue wool blanket, bought at a thrift store a few months ago, enveloped his small body. Zola smiled. She remembered how her mother-in-law, Imani, had scoffed when she showed it to her. "Zola, why do you buy these cheap trinkets? They'll irritate the baby's skin. You're too stingy. How can you be so raggedy with your own child?" Zola's heart sank. Raggedy. She was only trying to be realistic. Her husband, Kwame, was just an office worker at a private firm. His salary barely covered the day-to-day expenses in a major city. To pay for the delivery and buy the baby's things, Zola had worked tirelessly. Since her 6th month of pregnancy, she had started taking on commissions as a freelance graphic designer. She worked late into the night, often until her back was stiff and her eyes burned. She saved every penny. She repressed cravings for expensive takeout. She held back her envy when her friends showed off designer bags or new clothes, all for her son. She wanted to prove to herself and to Imani that she could be a good mother without being a burden to her husband, Kwame. Zola sighed. Her husband was a good man, but too submissive to his mother. Whenever Zola complained about Imani's attitude, Kwame would just say, "Be patient, sweetheart. Mom's just like that. She's an older person. You have to understand her." Kwame never defended her, and when it came to money, he always handed his paycheck over to Imani to manage. Zola was only given a small amount for daily expenses, which often wasn't enough. "I'm going to have to take on more work, Kwame," she told him one day. Kwame just nodded. "Sure, if you can do it, go ahead, but don't forget your obligations as a wife." Zola snapped out of her thoughts when the room door opened with a creak. A nurse entered with a kind smile. "You're awake, Mrs. Zola? How are you feeling? Can you sit up?" she asked while checking the IV. "I'm fine, thank you. Still a little sore, but very happy," Zola replied in a hoarse voice. "The baby is very healthy and gorgeous. 7 pounds and 19 inches. Perfect." The nurse praised her. "You've been strong, Mrs. Zola. You came to all your checkups and prepared everything yourself. Your husband told me you even took care of all the paperwork. You're very independent." Zola just offered a faint smile. She had been forced to be. Just as she was about to ask when her husband would return, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't a nurse, nor was it Kwame or Imani. Zola's heart hammered. A tall, well-built figure, dressed in an expensive silk shirt, stood in the doorway. His face, with its firm, authoritative features, looked somewhat tired, but his eyes were fixed on her. "Dad," Zola whispered in disbelief. It was Mr. LeVar Thorne, her father. When he entered, the small, shared room suddenly seemed much more suffocating. The scent of his pricey cologne overpowered the disinfectant. Mr. Thorne was a magnate, the owner of a business conglomerate with an intricate network of ventures. Zola was his only daughter, but she had chosen a modest life by marrying Kwame, a decision that initially met with her father's fierce opposition. Their relationship had cooled. Zola was too proud to ask, and Mr. Thorne was too busy to inquire. "Dad, how did you know I was here?" Zola asked, trying to sit up. The pain in her abdomen flared again. "I'm still your father, Zola," Mr. Thorne said in his deep, grave voice. He did not approach Zola's bed, but directed his gaze toward the baby's bassinet. His assistant, who stood behind him, held a huge basket of exotic fruits. Mr. Thorne approached the bassinet and contemplated his first grandchild. His hardened face gradually softened. "It's a boy," he murmured. "Yes, Dad. He's your grandson," Zola said proudly. Mr. Thorne extended a finger and touched the small hand peeking out from the blanket, but the smile that had formed on his face gradually vanished. His eyes scanned the room, the chipped iron bed, the squeaking fan, and the light blue wool blanket that wrapped his grandson. "You're in a room like this?" His voice was expressionless. "Yes, Dad, it's a shared room. As long as it's clean, it's enough," Zola replied, starting to feel uncomfortable. "And what is this blanket? Why is it so coarse?" he asked again, this time with more severity in his voice. I bought it at the thrift store, Dad. It's good quality. I washed it well." Mr. Thorne fell silent. His face tightened. He stared intently at his daughter. In his eyes was a contained fury. "Zola," he called her softly but firmly, "I came unannounced to surprise you. I thought you would be in a VVIP suite. I believed you would give our grandson the best." "Dad, Mr. Thorne interrupted her by raising a hand. "But what do I see? The baby's clothes are modest, the blanket is cheap, and your room is this." He took a deep breath. "Daughter, was the $7,500 I sent you every month not enough?" Zola's world seemed to stop. $7,500? Every month? She let out a small, nervous, forced laugh. "Dad, what are you talking about? Are you joking? $7,500? Joking?" Mr. Thorne's voice rose an octave. "I never joke about money, and much less when it concerns my only daughter." Zola's heart raced. She searched her father's gaze for any hint of a lie, but only found sincere fury. "Dad, you never sent me that money. I covered all the expenses and my needs with my savings and the money I earned as a freelancer." Silence fell. It seemed even the ceiling fan had stopped squeaking. Mr. Thorne stared at her with wide eyes. His face, previously pale with fatigue, was now red with anger, not embarrassment, but a growing fury. Now he understood. Why did his daughter look so thin and exhausted? Why was his grandson wrapped in a cheap blanket? "Freelance work, your savings," Mr. Thorne growled. Just then, the room door opened again. Imani's shrill laughter was heard even before she entered. "Ha ha 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 ha. Oh, Kwame, the things you do. You'll buy me another designer bag later, right? As long as the color matches, I'm good." Kwame and Imani entered the room. Their laughter stopped abruptly. Their hands were laden with bags from luxury boutiques. Imani's eyes, which had been sparkling a second ago, were now petrified by the sight of Mr. Thorne, who stood like a god of wrath next to Zola's bed. The resulting silence was deafening. Imani's cheerful laughter, which had been heard from the hallway, still echoed in their ears, a stark contrast to the glacial atmosphere in the room. Imani froze in the doorway, her hands clutching several paper bags with famous brand logos. Beside her, Kwame, Zola's husband, looked like a deer caught in headlights. His face was paper white, and the bags he carried nearly fell from his hands. Zola looked at them, then at the bags. A red leather handbag, obviously worth several $1,000s, peeked out of one of the bags Imani held, and then Zola looked at her baby's modest blanket. Something in her head began to throb painfully. Mr. Thorne did not move. He simply fixed them with a gaze so piercing it seemed capable of flaying them alive. His anger was so dense it felt like a suffocating heat filling the small room. Imani was the first to break the silence. Her instinct to take control of the situation immediately activated. She quickly dropped the bags on the floor outside the room and forced a smile, a grimace. "Well, Mr. Thorne, what a surprise. You're here already. You could have given us a heads up. Oh, finally, you've come to meet your grandson." She greeted him in the sweetest voice she could muster, acting as if nothing was wrong. Kwame also stammered, "Yes, Dad. Excuse us, we just arrived. We stepped out for a quick bite." He quickly hid the bags he was carrying behind his back, a gesture as useless as it was ridiculous. Mr. Thorne did not respond to their greetings. His gaze did not leave Kwame's and Imani's faces. "A quick bite, huh?" he sneered. "From what I see, you had your meal at a luxury boutique." Imani instantly felt cornered, but tried to disguise it. "Oh no, that's not it. We just stopped by to run an errand for a friend. We were on our way to the hospital cafeteria." "Sir, what's going on, Dad? What's happening?" Zola whispered. She was still confused. She didn't understand anything. She felt dizzy. "What is all this, Dad?" Mr. Thorne ignored Zola, taking a step forward. His imposing figure made Kwame and Imani instinctively recoil. "I will ask you one more time," Mr. Thorne said in a low, dangerous voice. "Kwame, Mrs. Imani, where is the $7,500 a month I gave you for my daughter?" This time, Zola didn't laugh. Instead, the confusion in her eyes gradually transformed into horror. She looked at her husband, searching for an answer. Kwame swallowed hard. A bead of sweat the size of a chickpea began to slide down his temple. He looked at his mother, pleading for help. Imani quickly stepped forward. Her false kindness had transformed into a feigned expression of sorrow. She even placed a hand on her chest as if she were shocked. "What money, Mr. Thorne? $7,500? My goodness, that's a lot of money," she exclaimed. "We have no idea what you're talking about. On the contrary, sir, we are the ones who have had a hard time." "Hard time?" Mr. Thorne repeated. "Yes, sir," Imani exclaimed. Now her tone had become accusatory. "It's just that Zola is a spendthrift. You don't know your daughter's true colors. Since she married my Kwame, you wouldn't believe how much money she spends. The money Kwame gives her is never enough. She's always demanding things. She says they're pregnancy cravings, but funny enough, all her cravings are super expensive." Zola felt breathless. "Mother-in-law, when have I ever asked you for anything expensive?" she protested. Her voice was weak, but it trembled with indignation. "I haven't asked for anything." "Oh, don't play innocent, Zola," Imani retorted bitterly. "You asked for those weird designer maternity clothes. You asked for food from expensive restaurants. My Kwame was climbing the walls. We've had to tighten our belts to cover your whims." That was a colossal lie. Zola remembered perfectly. She only had 3 maternity outfits, all bought at the thrift store. And as for food, she often had to go hungry because Imani cooked just enough, saying they had to save money. "Mother-in-law, that's a lie," Zola exclaimed, her eyes filling with tears. "When have I ever wasted money? On the contrary, I contributed to the household expenses with the money I earned working on my own. All these baby items I bought with my own money. You even called me stingy for buying a cheap blanket. See, there it is. You worked on your own? Of course you did. I bet you blew that money on your own cravings without giving your husband a dime," Imani counterattacked, feeling a sense of superiority as she saw Zola cry. "See, Mr. Thorne? You ask her politely, and she starts crying. What a crybaby. Kwame, look at your wife." Kwame merely kept his head bowed, not daring to look at Zola, or, of course, his father-in-law. Zola shook her head vehemently. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Dad, it's not true. Believe me, please." Mr. Thorne looked at his crying daughter on the bed, and then at Imani standing arrogantly, her face full of lies. His fury had reached its limit. "Enough," he growled. His voice wasn't loud, but it made the room reverberate. Imani instantly fell silent. Mr. Thorne focused his attention on Kwame. "Kwame, I am not talking to your mother. I am talking to you as my daughter's husband." Kwame slightly raised his head, his lips trembling. "Yes, Dad. For 3 years of marriage, on the first day of every month, I have transferred $7,500 to your bank account. I did it to your account on purpose, not Zola's, because I thought you, as the head of the family, would manage that money for my daughter's happiness." Zola felt as if her heart was being squeezed. $7,500 for 3 years, every month. She felt dizzy. It was an astronomical sum. "I didn't tell Zola on purpose," Mr. Thorne continued. "I wanted my daughter to feel that her husband was taking good care of her, that she was living comfortably. But what do I see today?" Mr. Thorne pointed to the baby's blanket. "My daughter gives birth in a shared room, and my grandson is wrapped in a cheap rag. Meanwhile you," he pointed to the shopping bags outside the door, "have just come back from treating yourselves." "Dad, it's a misunderstanding," Kwame stammered. That money we used for—" "Used it for what, Kwame?" Mr. Thorne pressed. "For household expenses, Dad. The mortgage, the car payment." "The house!" Mr. Thorne let out a sarcastic laugh. "The house you live in is not in your mother's name. And the car? Since when can a mere office worker like you afford a luxury car on payments?" Imani saw that the situation was getting ugly. "Well, but it's also our money, Mr. Thorne. Kwame's money counts too. It's normal for him to use it for the family and for his mother too." "So," Mr. Thorne said, "you took the money that should have been for my daughter and used it for your own benefit. Meanwhile, my pregnant daughter was working late into the night." "Isn't that right, Dad?" Kwame excused himself. "Zola wanted to work. She said she was bored at home." "Bored?" Zola repeated softly. Her heart was broken. "I worked because the money you gave me was never enough, Kwame. I worked because your mother wouldn't even give me money to buy vitamins." Tension again seized the room. Mr. Thorne looked at his son-in-law with a murderous expression. "Kwame, I want no more excuses." He took his phone out of the pocket of his expensive suit. "Show me your bank account statements right now." Kwame froze. This was the end. "Dad, please, not here. The shame," he whispered. "Shame!" Mr. Thorne shouted. "After deceiving my daughter for 3 years, now you talk to me about shame. Show it to me now." "My phone doesn't have good reception in the hospital, Dad." Kwame excused himself. A pathetic lie. He could barely hold the phone. "Stop making excuses. Or do you want to rub your money in our faces, Mr. Thorne?" Imani suddenly yelled. "Do you think just because you have money you can insult us like this? My Kwame works too. We have our own money. We don't need yours." "If you didn't need it, why did you use it?" Mr. Thorne counterattacked. Imani was speechless, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. Mr. Thorne was unmoved. He looked at Kwame. "I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2. Kwame trembled. He looked at his mother and then at Zola, who was crying uncontrollably in bed. He was between a rock and a hard place. "Dad, please." "I don't need to see his phone," Mr. Thorne interrupted him coldly. He dialed a number on his phone. "Hello? Send me a complete statement of all monthly transfers to the account in Kwame's name for the last 3 years, and a trace of all expenses from that account, right now." Mr. Thorne hung up. He looked at Kwame and Imani. "You take me for a fool? I have always monitored the flow of that money. I just wanted to hear you admit it from your own mouths. But you chose to lie." Kwame and Imani collapsed onto the hard waiting room chairs. They knew the game was over. The silence in the room was dense, heavier than the stale hospital air. The ceiling fan still squeaked, and the only sound Zola heard was her own heart pounding against her ears. $144,000. That figure spun in her head like a top. $7,500 a month for 3 years. Zola looked at her father, then at Kwame with his head bowed, and at Imani, pale as the wall. She tried to process that information. to connect it with her life over the past 3 years. 3 years of struggle, of deprivation, of always feeling guilty for not having enough, for being a burden. Suddenly, fragments of memories surfaced in her mind, now tinged with a new and painful meaning. She remembered when she was 4 months along. It wasn't a luxury craving. She just desperately wanted some high-quality mangoes, a little more expensive but perfectly ripe from the grocery store. She mustered the courage and asked Kwame for them. As always, he passed the message to Imani, and Imani said, "Why buy something so expensive? There are plenty at the market. Don't be so spoiled." The next day, Imani brought mangoes, but they were the ones sold almost rotten at a clearance price. "Eat this. Mangoes are mangoes," her mother-in-law told her. Zola cried secretly in the bathroom as she ate the acidic, fibrous fruit, trying to keep down the nausea. Now she knew. On the day she asked for $10 mangoes, $4,000 had been deposited into her husband's account. She remembered when she was 7 months along. Her belly was huge, and her back hurt terribly, but she forced herself to continue with her design work to meet deadlines. She sat at the narrow dining table in front of her laptop until 3 in the morning. The baby kicked constantly, as if protesting. Kwame left the room, not to console her, but to get water. He saw her exhausted with deep, dark circles under her eyes. What did he say? "Don't forget to get up tomorrow morning. Prepare breakfast for Mom before I go to work." Not a rest up, not a let me help you. Kwame let his pregnant wife work to the point of exhaustion, while there was enough money in his bank account to hire a dozen assistants. She remembered her visits to the gynecologist. The doctor prescribed a high-dose vitamin complex and calcium. The fetus was healthy, but the mother was suffering from malnutrition. "Miss Zola, you must take this to have strength for labor," the doctor told her. Zola saw the total price, $60. With the money Imani rationed for her daily use, she didn't have that amount. She returned home and showed it to Kwame. Once again, it was Imani who responded, "Vitamins that expensive? Doctors just want to scam people. I didn't take any vitamins when I was pregnant with Kwame, and look how healthy he turned out. Take the iron pills they give for free at the community clinic. Don't be weak." That night, Zola cried. She felt like a failure, like a bad mother. Even before her son was born, she felt she couldn't give him the best. In the end, she quietly contacted a client and asked for more work in exchange for an advance. A week later, she bought the vitamins with her hard-earned money and had to lie to Imani, telling her a friend had given them to her. While she felt guilty about spending money on her own baby's health, they, her husband and mother-in-law, enjoyed a life of luxury. Zola's tears fell silently. They were no longer tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of regret, of realizing how incredibly naive she had been. "Zola, sweetheart." Kwame's trembling voice broke her thoughts. He tried to hold her hand. Zola sharply pulled it away. "Don't touch me," she growled. Ping. Mr. Thorne's phone rang. A notification. 2. Emails and messages cascaded in. His assistant had been quick. Mr. Thorne didn't need to open his laptop. The wide screen of his phone displayed all the information he needed. His face remained calm, but his eyes burned. "Kwame," Mr. Thorne said, "your account statement is fascinating." Kwame bowed his head even lower. "Let's see," Mr. Thorne continued, his voice serene but lethal. "Last month, deposit of $7,500 from me on the first day. On the 4th day, card payment at a luxury restaurant, $300. Oh, that must have been a splendid dinner." Imani looked nervous. "On the 7th day," Mr. Thorne continued, "payment at the fancy boutique, $2,500. He looked up from the phone, staring directly at Imani. "I suppose this is the handbag you were showing off at your social gatherings? The one you said Kwame bought with the sweat of his brow." Imani flinched. "Sir, have you been spying on us?" "No need to spy," Mr. Thorne replied coldly. "I simply protect my assets, and my daughter is my most valuable asset, one you two have abused." Mr. Thorne looked back at the screen. And 3 months ago, deposit of $7,500. The following week, down payment for a red sports sedan in Kwame's name. Zola's eyes widened. A car? The red car you said was a company vehicle, Kwame? Kwame stammered. It was a bonus, Zola. A company bonus. A bonus, he says. Mr. Thorne let out a dry laugh. Your company doesn't give bonuses that generous, Kwame. I know your exact salary and I know your company's results. This money right here, he tapped the phone screen, is my daughter's money. It is enough. Imani suddenly stood up. She couldn't take it anymore. Her face, previously pale, was now red with rage. So what? What does it matter? It's Kwame's right. He's my son. It's normal for a son to take care of his mother, to buy her gifts. Taking care of his mother with money stolen from his wife? Mr. Thorne asked acidly. Stolen from whom? Imani retorted fiercely. It's her husband's money. It's his right. Besides, you yourself transferred it to Kwame's account, didn't you? Well, then it belongs to Kwame, not Zola. If it really was for her, why didn't you deposit it into her account? Because I trusted, Mr. Thorne growled. I trusted that a husband would fulfill his responsibility. I was wrong. Yes, you were wrong, Imani exclaimed, feeling victorious. So that money was already ours by right. If we bought handbags, cars, or remodeled the house with it, it's our business. You have no right to interfere. Remodeled the house, Zola recalled. 2 months ago, their house had been completely renovated. The kitchen was expanded, and a new air conditioner and a private bathroom were installed in Imani's room. Zola had to sleep in the narrow living room for a month. Imani said she had won money in a lottery. Zola's heart shattered. She looked at her husband. Kwame, is what your mother's saying true? You thought it was your right? Kwame didn't have the courage to answer. He could only cry, but his tears seemed fake. He wasn't crying for Zola, but for himself. Suddenly, Kwame fell to his knees, not before Zola, but before Mr. Thorne. He crawled and tried to grab his father-in-law's feet. Dad, forgive me. I was wrong. My mother forced me. Dad, I promise. I'll change. I'll pay the money back. But please don't get me fired. Please don't call the police. Zola watched him, stunned. Even at a moment like this, what Kwame feared was losing his job and going to jail. Not losing his wife's trust, not remorse for having abandoned her and their son. Ping! Mr. Thorne's phone rang again. It was a text message from his assistant. Mr. Thorne read it. His face hardened even more. He looked at Kwame kneeling on the floor. Get up, he ordered him. Kwame did not move. I said get up, Mr. Thorne shouted. Kwame jumped up, startled. Mr. Thorne looked at him. My assistant just sent me the asset tracking report. You've been smarter than I thought. Not only have you spent the money, but you've used it to buy assets in your name. Kwame and Imani froze. The red sedan is fully paid off and in Kwame's name, and the house you live in. Mr. Thorne looked at Imani. The mortgage was backed by the bank, and you used the money I sent you to settle the renovation loan. You didn't just steal, you laundered the money. Mr. Thorne turned around. He was no longer looking at his daughter's husband and mother-in-law. He looked at Zola, who was sitting silently in bed, her eyes dry. Zola, he called her softly, I'll ask you one more time. After everything you've heard, everything you've discovered, do you want to continue with this man and this marriage? Mr. Thorne's question hung in the air. The shared room was silent as a tomb, all eyes focused on Zola. Kwame looked at her with a pitiful expression, soaked in sweat. Imani looked at her with a sharp, hateful expression. Zola looked at her father. This man who had always seemed cold and distant was now standing before her, being her protective shield. And then she looked at the baby sleeping in his bassinet. An innocent being who nearly grew up in an environment full of lies, a baby who deserved so much better. Zola slowly moved her gaze toward Kwame, her husband, the man she had loved, or at least the one she thought she had loved, The man she had defended against her father 3 years ago, the man she had trusted to lead her family. Before Zola could answer, Imani could no longer contain herself. Her patience had run out. The mask of the suffering, patient mother-in-law had long since dropped. "Enough! Don't give us that pitiful look," Imani shouted, pointing at Zola. "You think you scare us?" "Yes, we used the money. So what? Is it wrong? It was money my son received from his father-in-law. Of course he used it." Kwame tried to hold his mother's arm. "Mom, stop, please." "You shut up, Kwame," Imani cut him off. "You're a mama's boy. You're afraid of your wife and your father-in-law." "Listen to me carefully, Mr. Thorne." Now she looked defiantly at Zola's father. "I was against Kwame marrying your daughter from the beginning. I knew a rich girl would be spoiled, useless, someone who would only want to be served, and in the end, I was right." Mr. Thorne raised an eyebrow, letting the woman continue. "We thought that by marrying a magnate's daughter, our life would be easier, that some of her wealth would rub off on us. But no. Zola lived a life of lies, pretending to be independent, wearing rags, eating whatever. I was ashamed in front of the neighbors, my friends, my daughter-in-law, married to the son of a successful businessman, and she looked like a beggar. People would think we didn't treat her well when the reality is she was just stingy." "Mother-in-law!" Zola groaned. "What? You're cheap! You saved money to the point of exhaustion. My grandson is born and you buy him this cheap blanket. How was I supposed to look people in the face?" Imani was becoming more and more agitated. "So when you sent that money to Kwame, I told my son, 'This is your reward, son. Payment for putting up with this woman.' And of course we used it. We enjoyed it. We bought good things so people would stop looking down on us, so I could show off at my gatherings that my son was a successful man, even if his wife looked like she was homeless." Every word that came out of Imani's mouth was a dagger stabbing Zola's heart. Naive, beggar, stingy, spoiled, homeless. "And you, Zola," Imani pointed at her again. "You're stupid. With the good husband you have, an obedient man, why did you insist on working so hard? For what? What were you going to do with all that money? $7,500 a month. A woman like you would have spent it all on cosmetics and clothes. Better that I had it. I bought gold. I invested in luxury handbags. That's an investment. Their value keeps going up, much better than letting the money go to waste in your hands." The hate-filled monologue finally ended. Imani gasped, her chest heaving. She seemed satisfied to have vomited all her bile. A brief silence. Zola's tears had dried. Her face was pale, but her eyes no longer showed sadness, only an emptiness that slowly turned into a cold, burning flame. She ignored Imani. She didn't even look at her. She focused all her attention on Kwame, her husband, who was trembling, standing between her and his mother. "Kwame," Zola called him. Her voice was incredibly calm, almost expressionless. Kwame flinched. He didn't expect Zola to call him so calmly. "Yes, sweetheart?" "I'm only going to ask you one thing," Zola said. "I won't ask about the car or the house. Just one thing." Kwame swallowed. "What, Zola?" "When I was 7 months pregnant," Zola's voice was low but clear, "and the doctor said I was malnourished. And I asked you to buy me a prenatal shake that cost $20. Your mother said there was no money." Kwame started to tremble. "I ask you, Kwame, that day you knew your mother was lying, didn't you?" Kwame looked at the floor. He didn't dare to look his wife in the eyes. He remembered that day. After Zola left the room, his mother laughed. "Prenatal shake? What nonsense. Condensed milk is enough," she said, and he, Kwame, simply kept quiet. "Answer me, Kwame," Zola insisted. Kwame nodded very slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he whispered. "One more thing," Zola said. "When I was working until 3 in the morning in front of the laptop, with a broken back and the baby kicking non-stop, you saw me, didn't you?" Kwame tried to excuse himself. "You saw me?" Zola interrupted, repeating the question. And you knew there were hundreds of thousands of dollars in your account that my father had sent for me? That's not a question. It's a statement. Kwame could no longer dodge it. He knew Zola didn't want an answer, just a confirmation. He bowed his head deeply. This time his nod was clearer. Zola's world collapsed. But from the wreckage, she stood firm. She had all the answers she needed. 3 years of patience, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of love. It had all been in vain. She took a deep breath. The pain from the surgical stitches was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. Zola raised her head. She no longer looked at Kwame. She looked directly into her father's eyes. "Dad," her voice was now firm and strong, "I have my answer. Get me and my son out of here right now." Imani was stunned. "What? You're leaving?" "I'm getting a divorce," Zola continued. "What?" Kwame shouted, finally showing an emotion that wasn't fear. "Zola, no, please, it's a misunderstanding. I can explain. It's all my mother's fault. I love you, Zola. For our son." "Our son?" Zola let out a sarcastic, chilling laugh. "The son you covered with a blanket you called cheap, the son you denied vitamins to, the son whose mother you let work to exhaustion while you lived the high life. Don't ever say my son's name again." "How insolent you are, Zola!" Imani yelled. "Your father showed you a little pity, and now you've become arrogant. Divorce if you want. Do you think you can live without Kwame? Who will want a divorced woman with a child? You'll crawl back to us begging for money." Zola just offered a faint smile. "Mrs. Imani," Mr. Thorne's voice was so cold it could freeze fire. "You've picked the wrong enemy." Mr. Thorne wasted no time. He dialed a number on his phone. "Hello? Prepare my best legal team right now," he said, looking directly at Kwame and Imani. "With full powers. Arrange to transfer my daughter and my grandson to the penthouse. File a divorce petition on behalf of Zola Thorne. Demands full custody. And," Mr. Thorne smiled slightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "a claim for material and moral damages. Claim the $144,000 plus interest. Seize all assets in Kwame's and Imani's names that were acquired with that money. I want them to be left with nothing right now." The shared room seemed to shrink. The air, previously stale, now felt heavy, laden with poison. The orders Mr. Thorne had given over the phone were concise, clear, and relentless. The echo of his words still resonated in Kwame's and Imani's ears. "What?" Imani was the first to find her voice, though it sounded hoarse. "Seize assets? The police? Mr. Thorne, you can't be serious. This is a family matter." Kwame, for his part, looked as if his soul had been ripped out. His knees buckled. Dad, don't do that, please," he whimpered, trying to appeal to his compassion again. I'll work, Dad. I'll pay it back. I'll divorce her. Don't send me to jail, Dad, please." Mr. Thorne did not respond. He put the phone in his suit pocket. His gaze was fixed on Zola. "Are you ready, daughter?" he asked softly, as if the two panicked people in front of him were mere shadows. Zola nodded. Her hands, which had been clutching the blanket, slowly relaxed. She had made her decision. There were no more doubts. "I'm ready, Dad." "No, you're not leaving," Kwame suddenly shouted. He lunged forward, trying to grab Zola's bed. "Zola, listen to me. It's all my mother's fault. She poisoned my mind. I love you, Zola. For our son." Before Kwame's hand could touch the edge of the bed, his body was intercepted by Mr. Thorne's personal assistant, a stout man in a black suit who had remained silent by the door. The man moved quickly and efficiently, stopping Kwame with a hand on his chest, his face expressionless. "Excuse me, sir. Maintain your distance." "Let go of me! That woman is my wife!" Kwame screamed. "She is no longer your wife," Mr. Thorne declared. Then he pressed the nurse call button next to Zola's bed. "I will not allow my daughter to remain for 1 second longer in this hell you have created." The door opened. Not only did a nurse enter, but also 2 hospital security guards and the supervisor, who had apparently already been alerted by Mr. Thorne's assistant. "What's going on, Mr. Thorne? Why all the commotion in the room?" the supervisor asked with a concerned face. "I am the patient, Zola Thorne's father," Mr. Thorne said calmly. His presence commanded respect. "I am moving my daughter right now, and I ask you to remove these 2 people," he pointed to Kwame and Imani, "from this room. They are disturbing the patient's peace." "What? Kick us out?" Kwame protested. "This woman is my wife, and this child is my son." "We're his son-in-law and his co-mother-in-law," Imani added. The supervisor seemed confused. "Excuse me, Mr. Thorne, but according to procedure—" "Who handled my daughter's admission paperwork?" Mr. Thorne interrupted her. "Mrs. Zola herself, sir, personally," a nurse replied after checking the records. "Perfect," Mr. Thorne said. "I am taking over now. Transfer my daughter and my grandson to the best VVIP suite in this hospital. All expenses are on my account. And prohibit these 2 people," he pointed to Kwame and Imani again, "from approaching my daughter within 100 yards. VVIP. Imani's eyes widened. "Kwame, your wife is escaping. Do something, you loser!" But Kwame couldn't do anything. 2 security guards were already flanking him. At that moment, 3 other men entered the room. They weren't wearing hospital uniforms. They were wearing impeccable suits, much more expensive than the one Kwame had worn at his wedding. They carried leather briefcases. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thorne," said the man in the center. "We are your legal representation team." Kwame and Imani froze. This was real. It wasn't a bluff. The lawyer ignored the couple and addressed Mr. Thorne directly. "All the documentation is ready, sir. The power of attorney, the draft divorce petition, and the initial report for the police." Then the lawyer turned to Kwame and Imani. His face was kind, but his eyes were cold as ice. "Good afternoon, Mr. Kwame, Mrs. Imani. I represent our client, Mr. Thorne, and the soon-to-be Mrs. Zola. I don't want a divorce," Kwame said in a panic. "That choice is no longer in your hands, Mr. Kwame," the lawyer replied calmly. "You currently have 2 options. I recommend you listen carefully." While the lawyer spoke, the hospital staff moved quickly. A wheelchair for Zola arrived. A VVIP bassinet with a softer, more appropriate cashmere blanket was brought in by a dedicated nurse. Zola, with the help of the nurse, slowly sat up and for the first time cradled her son with a sense of relief. "The first option," the lawyer said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm. "You sign these documents. An acknowledgement of having received and used the $144,000, a divorce agreement, the cession of full custody to Mrs. Zola, and the transfer of ownership of the red sedan and a housing unit as the first payment for the return of those funds." "What? Not our house!" Imani shouted. "It's in my name!" "A house renovated and paid off with money that didn't belong to you, Mrs. Imani," the lawyer corrected her. "If you cooperate and sign everything today, our client might, and I repeat, might have the leniency not to file criminal charges for embezzlement and money laundering." Kwame looked at his mother, terrified. Jail. That word echoed in his ears. "And the second option?" Kwame whispered, his voice barely audible. "The second option," the lawyer's smile vanished, "is that you refuse. We will file the civil lawsuit this same afternoon and simultaneously the criminal complaint with the police. The transfer receipts, the recording of your confession from a moment ago." He pointed to Mr. Thorne's phone. "And your bank statements are more than enough. We guarantee you won't win. You will lose everything. And most importantly, you will spend a good time behind bars. Choose." Imani trembled. Her face, previously red with anger, was now pale as paper. Her arrogance had evaporated. Only fear remained. In the midst of the chaos, Zola was already in the wheelchair, hugging her baby, ready to leave. Mr. Thorne was by her side. His assistant was pushing the chair. As they crossed the threshold, Kwame made one last desperate move. He broke free from his guards and fell to his knees on the floor. "Zola!" he cried uncontrollably. "Sweetheart, don't leave. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I'll kiss your feet. Please don't leave me." Zola motioned for the assistant to stop. Kwame looked at her with hopeful eyes. "Zola." Zola looked at her husband's face, the face she once loved, now bathed in crocodile tears. She felt nothing, no compassion, no love, only exhaustion. Slowly, Zola looked straight ahead. "Move forward," she ordered the assistant softly. The wheelchair started moving again, leaving behind Kwame kneeling in the hallway, and Amani collapsed in a chair, staring stunned at the stack of legal documents in the lawyer's hands. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway opened. Zola entered with her father without looking back. "Zola!" Kwame's desperate cry was the last thing she heard before the elevator doors closed, carrying her toward her new life. The silence inside the spacious VVIP elevator, smelling of expensive cleaning products, was absolute. Only the gentle hum of the machinery was heard as they ascended. Zola leaned her head against the back of the wheelchair. She closed her eyes for a moment. Her embrace around the small baby in her lap tightened. She could feel her son's tiny heartbeat, rhythmic and calm, a contrast to the storm she had just left behind. Mr. Thorne was by her side with a protective hand on the back of the wheelchair. He said nothing. He knew his daughter needed time. The elevator doors opened, not to a normal hallway, but directly into a luxurious private lobby on the top floor. That VVIP suite looked more like a five-star hotel. Thick carpets, wood-paneled walls, and warm lighting. Another head nurse was already waiting. "Welcome, Mrs. Zola. Mr. Thorne, the room is ready." They were led to the room. Zola held her breath. It was huge. It had a separate living area, a comfortable velvet sofa, and a state-of-the-art motorized patient bed. But what caught her attention the most was the gigantic floor-to-ceiling window offering a panoramic view of the city. The sunset sky was already starting to turn orange. In a corner of the room was a beautiful solid wood crib, perfectly equipped with premium baby items, all in their original packaging, a world apart from the plastic bassinet and the thrift store blanket. "Rest, ma'am. I'll help you move the baby," the nurse said gently. Zola hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to let go of her son. Mr. Thorne seemed to understand. "Let me hold him," he said. And carefully, Mr. Thorne took his first grandson from Zola's arms. The man, who had always seemed so cold, looked a little clumsy, but his eyes radiated immense tenderness. "Hello, little champion. Welcome to the family," he whispered to the baby. It was at that moment, seeing her father holding her son in that safe, luxurious room, that all the tension Zola had repressed for hours, or perhaps years, finally erupted. Zola's shoulders began to shake. A sob escaped her lips. Then another. She covered her face with her hands, and her crying turned into a torrent. She cried. It was not the crying of pain or rage from the other room. It was a crying of relief, a crying that washed away all the wounds, all the lies, all the humiliation she had swallowed over the last 3 years. She cried for her own stupidity. She cried for her lost years, and she cried for the fact that she was finally free. Mr. Thorne quickly handed the baby to the nurse and knelt beside Zola's wheelchair. He hugged his daughter tightly. "Cry, daughter. Let it all out. It's over now. It's all finished." "Dad, I'm sorry," Zola sobbed against her father's shoulder. "I was so foolish." "Shh," Mr. Thorne interrupted her. "You're not foolish. You're just too good. And they took advantage of your goodness. From now on, no one will ever hurt you again, I promise." Meanwhile, in the shared room downstairs, the scene was very different. Kwame's desperate cries in the hallway did not stop the lawyers. They re-entered the room where Imani was still sitting, rigid. Kwame stumbled in after them. His gait was weak. His eyes were vacant. "Good," the lead lawyer said, placing the stack of documents and a pen on the table in front of Imani. "The time for negotiation is over. It's time to decide, jail or the signature." Imani looked at the papers. On the first page, it clearly read, Acknowledgement of debt and asset transfer. Her eyes widened at the figure of $144,000. This is robbery, she growled. This is justice, Mrs. Imani, the lawyer replied coldly. Consider it a discount. If we take it to trial, the amount could triple with bank interest and costs for moral damages, not to mention our fees, which would also be your responsibility, and the bonus of a stint in prison. Imani's hands trembled. She looked at Kwame. Kwame, look at this! We're going to be on the street! Kwame didn't respond. He just stared blankly at the wall. His world had already collapsed. His car, his supposed position at the company, he was sure Mr. Thorne would take it all too. And now his house. Mom, Kwame whispered, clinging to the last thread of sanity he had left. Sign. What? You're going to give up so easily? That house is your mother's. It's a house we won't be able to live in if we're in jail, Mom, Kwame yelled, finally losing his temper. Didn't you hear the word jail? I don't want to go to jail, and all of this is your fault because of your greed. My fault? Imani jumped up. Don't make me laugh. You enjoyed it too. You drove that car. You loved being called a successful man, and now you blame me, you ungrateful son. Stop, the lawyer's voice cut through their fighting. We are not paid to watch family dramas. Either you sign, or I call the police right now. He took out his phone. Imani looked at the phone, then at the pile of papers. With a trembling hand, she grabbed the pen. Where? She growled. The lawyer guided her, pointing out where she had to sign on each of the sticky tabs. Imani signed with such rage that she almost tore the paper. When she finished, she threw the pen onto the table. Mr. Kwame, your turn, the lawyer said. Kwame signed like an automaton, without resistance. His signature was almost illegible. Excellent, the lawyer said, collecting the documents. One more thing. He held out his hand. The keys to the car and the house. You have 24 hours to vacate the property. Tomorrow afternoon, our team will come to present it. Kwame reluctantly checked his pockets, handing over the keychain for the red car and the keys to the house, which had been his pride. After the lawyers left, Kwame and Imani were left alone in the room. Imani, who had been so strong just a moment ago, suddenly collapsed. Her legs gave way, she fell to the floor and burst into tears. It's all over! Our money, our house! Oh, Kwame, where are we going to live? Kwame didn't answer. He sat on a chair, staring blankly at the luxury brand bags they had just brought. They lay on the floor now, ironic and pathetic. In the hospital's penthouse suite, Zola had just finished nursing her son for the first time in peace. Her old phone, with the slightly cracked screen, rested on the nightstand. Suddenly, it vibrated. Kwame's name appeared on the screen. A call. The vibration ceased, and then text message notifications appeared. 1, 2, 10. Sweetheart, please pick up. I made a mistake. Mom fainted. Zola, please, I have nothing left. You're too cruel. We can start over, honey, I promise. Zola's friend, Amara, who had just arrived after receiving the call from Mr. Thorne, saw the string of messages. My God, Zola, this man has no shame, Amara growled. She looked at her friend. Are you going to answer him? Zola looked at the phone screen. Kwame's pitiful face flashed briefly in her mind, but it was soon replaced by the image of Imani's sneering face, of herself working until 3 a.m, of that cheap blanket. With a steady hand, Zola picked up the phone. Amara thought she was going to reply, but Zola held down the power button and selected the power off option. The screen turned black. There is no us anymore, Zola whispered to herself. She looked at Amara and for the first time in a long time, truly smiled. Now it's just my son and me. The tranquility of the VVIP suite was a luxury Zola had almost forgotten. Over the next 2 days, she recovered not only physically, but also mentally, surrounded by patient nurses, comfortable facilities, and most importantly, security. Mr. Thorne never strayed far. He temporarily moved his office to the suite's living room, managing his multi-million-dollar businesses while keeping an eye on his first grandson. Her friend Amara became her emotional shield, visiting daily, bringing her favorite food, even though the hospital's was already excellent, and above all, making her laugh. "So," Amara said on the third day while peeling an apple, "what are you going to name this handsome fellow? Don't tell me since his last name is Thorne, you're going to call him Mr. President from childhood." Zola laughed, a genuine laugh she hadn't let out in a long time. She looked at her son, who was sleeping peacefully in his comfortable crib. "His name is Elias," she whispered. "Elias Thorne." "Elias," Amara repeated. "A new beginning. It suits you, Zola. This is truly the dawn of your new life." "And Elias," Zola continued, "because he is the clearest evidence of God's grace in my life. He saved me." While Zola was finding the light again in another part of the city, dark clouds loomed over the house that had been her false stage for 3 years. Kwame and Imani were living the longest 24 hours of their lives. After the lawyers left, the house felt empty. Imani's explosive anger had turned into terrifying, hysterical crying. "My house! Your father's inheritance! They've taken it from us, Kwame! They've taken it from us!" she screamed, beating her chest. "It was already mortgaged, Mom. We paid it off with Zola's money," Kwame replied in a hoarse voice. He didn't care anymore. He just wanted it all to end. His head was blocked. He had been fired. A single text message from Mr. Thorne to the Human Resources Department of his company, and within minutes his contract was terminated without compensation, with a note in his file for gross ethical misconduct. "We have to move, Mom, now." "Move where?" Imani shouted. "Under a bridge? You don't have money? I don't either. My credit cards are all blocked. It must have been that old man." Kwame didn't tell his mother that he still had a small fund of black market money that he had managed to smuggle out of the office. Money he had hidden even from her. It was his only hope. They began packing in a terrible atmosphere. Imani wasn't packing. She was busy stuffing the gold jewelry she had bought with Zola's money inside her girdle, and wrapping her few authentic designer bags in old cloth bags, hoping the seizure team wouldn't notice. Kwame, for his part, put his clothes in a single large suitcase. He took one last look at the red sedan in the garage. Its shine seemed to mock his misfortune. The next day, at 12 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the lawyer. It was worse. 3 stout men accompanied by a member of the legal team and a locksmith. "Time's up, Mr. Kwame, Mrs. Imani," one of the legal team men said in an expressionless voice. Imani tried one last act of resistance, running to the door and starting to scream at the neighbors. "Help! Help! They're kicking us out unfairly. Rich people want to steal our house. Help!" Several neighbors came out curious, but the legal team was prepared. He pulled out a copy of the court order and the document signed by Imani the day before. "This lady voluntarily signed an asset transfer as compensation for a case of embezzlement. Everything is legal. Please do not get involved in legal matters." The neighbors' faces, previously compassionate, turned wary. Embezzlement. That word resonated. They immediately began whispering. Seeing that her resistance was useless, Imani deflated. "Gather your belongings and leave, please. We are going to change the lock on this house," the employee said. Under the gaze of dozens of gossiping neighbors, Kwame dragged his suitcase out. Imani followed, carrying a bulky cloth bag, covering her face with the edge of a scarf to hide her shame. "Wait a moment," Kwame shouted. The legal team employee stopped. "The red sedan. We could use it to carry the suitcases. We'll return it later. The legal team man looked at him as if he were dust. "Mr. Kwame, that car has not been yours since yesterday. It is a seized asset. Leave." He pointed toward the main street. Kwame bowed his head, walked to the end of the street, and hailed an old taxi. He put the suitcase in and helped his mother, who was still crying, get in. "Where are we going, Kwame?" Imani sobbed inside the taxi. "To a boarding house near the train tracks," Kwame replied quietly. It's the only thing I can afford with what we have left." As the taxi drove away, the locksmith began his work. The sound of the drill breaking the old lock was heartbreaking. Click! The door closed. The new lock was set. The chapter of their luxurious life was officially over. Almost simultaneously, in the VVIP lobby of the hospital, Amara received a message on her phone. She showed it to Zola, who was elegantly dressed in a simple but stylish dress her father had given her. The message was short. Asset 1, housing. And Asset 2, car, secured. Clients Kwame and Imani have cooperated. Zola read the message. There was no triumphant smile or laugh of satisfaction, only a long, deep sigh. She closed her eyes for a moment. One last tear rolled down her cheek, a tear that wiped away the last vestiges of the past. "It's over, Zola," Amara whispered, taking her hand. Zola nodded. "Yes, it's over." Mr. Thorne emerged from the administration office, putting his platinum credit card in his pocket. "All settled. Let's go, daughter, home." A nurse brought Elias, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket. Zola got out of the wheelchair. She was still a little sore, but she refused to be pushed. She walked on her own, held Elias firmly, and left the hospital, crossing the gleaming lobby doors. Outside, a luxurious black sedan with a private chauffeur was waiting for her. She got into the car, leaving behind the smell of disinfectant and a painful past. She didn't look back. The drive home felt surreal to Zola. The luxurious car slid silently through the city streets. Outside there was traffic and dust, but inside she and Elias were enveloped in cold, quiet luxury. She sat in the back seat with Amara, while Mr. Thorne in the passenger seat was busy with business calls. It was the first time she had seen the outside world after a week trapped in the drama, but she didn't feel like she was going home. She didn't know which home she should return to. Kwame's house was no longer hers, and where was her father taking her? The car did not head to her father's luxurious suburban community that she had known since childhood. Instead, it turned toward the financial district and stopped at the lobby of an imposing skyscraper. "Dad, where are we going?" Zola asked, uneasy. "Home," Mr. Thorne replied briefly with a slight smile. They went up in a private elevator directly to the top floor, the 50th floor. The elevator doors opened, and what greeted them was not an office lobby, but the breathtaking living room of a penthouse apartment. The walls were almost all glass, offering a 360-degree view of the city. The floor was imported marble. The furniture was minimalist, but looked incredibly expensive. "My God, Dad, where are we?" Zola was stunned. "In your house. In your home," Mr. Thorne said. He took Elias from Zola's arms. "My assistant has been preparing it since yesterday. Welcome home, daughter." A middle-aged woman in a uniform greeted them. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Zola. I am Mrs. Bethel. I am Elias's nanny. And this is Mrs. Jones, your personal postpartum nurse." Zola was even more confused. Nanny? Personal nurse? Mr. Thorne took her on a tour of the house. There were 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom was larger than the entire rental apartment she had lived in. There was a guest room, and another had been converted into the most luxurious baby room she had ever seen. The crib was solid wood. There was a closet full of imported educational toys and designer baby clothes, and an air conditioning system with temperature control. Amara whistled softly. "Zola, this is insane. It's a palace." That night, after Amara left and Elias was sleeping in his luxurious crib, Zola couldn't sleep. She stood in front of the enormous window, contemplating the flickering city lights. She should be happy. She was free, she was rich, she was safe, but her heart was restless. She felt small. She felt she had just moved from one prison to another. Before, the narrow prison of Kwame and Imani, now her father's golden cage. She hadn't done anything to deserve this. She was just her father's daughter. The next morning, after a breakfast prepared by her father's personal chef, Zola went to her father's study in the penthouse. "Dad," she called him softly. Mr. Thorne looked up from a pile of papers. Yes, daughter. Do you need something? Don't you like the food? No, Dad. Zola took a deep breath. Thank you. Thank you for everything, for Elias, for this place. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Mr. Thorne said gently. All of this is your right, one that is long overdue. But I can't live like this, Dad, Zola said. Mr. Thorne's brow furrowed. What do you mean you can't live like this? Like this? Being served, pitied, being a burden to you again? I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I'm a mother. Zola looked her father directly in the eyes. I don't want to be a parasite. Mr. Thorne's face, previously soft, hardened. Parasite? What do you mean? Before, I was a parasite in Kwame's and Imani's house, even though I worked, and now I feel like a parasite here. I don't want to live on your compassion, Zola said firmly. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Mr. Thorne was silent. He looked at his daughter, searching for hesitation in her eyes, but what he found was the same spark he had, the spark of a fighter. Slowly, a smile spread across Mr. Thorne's lips, a smile of genuine pride. And what's your plan? Zola's heart raced. This was the moment. I want to start my own business. What kind of business? I'm a graphic designer, but I'm also a mother, Zola began to explain. Dad, look at all these baby items you bought me. They're luxurious, they're good, but they must cost a fortune. Not all mothers can afford them. I want to create my own brand of premium quality baby items, with beautiful design, but at a reasonable price. She paused and continued. And clothes, modest clothing for mothers. I know what it feels like to spend all day in old clothes. I know how hard it is to find nursing wear that is comfortable, elegant, and not revealing. I want to create a line of modest, modern fashion for mothers like me, clothes that make them feel beautiful and respected, even when they're busy caring for their children. Mr. Thorne listened intently. His face showed no expression. I have the designs, Zola said nervously. She took out the tablet her father had given her and opened her design portfolio folder. Can I do it? I know I can. I just need the capital. When Zola finished, Mr. Thorne leaned back in his chair. Agreed. It's a good plan. The market for modest fashion and baby items never dies. Are you serious, Dad? Zola asked, hopeful. Of course, Mr. Thorne said. I will give you the capital, but, her father continued, not as a gift. I'll give it to you as a business loan. Prepare a proper business plan. Calculate the production costs, marketing, expected profits, present it to me, and if it's viable, I'll transfer the funds. Zola's face, already shining, lit up even more. This was what she wanted. Not a gift, not compassion, but a challenge. Trust. I'll prepare the business plan right away, Dad. Right now. Good. Bring in Amara. Make her your manager. She's a smart and loyal girl. I'll give you access to my company's branding team for advice. Mr. Thorne stood up. That's my daughter. Almost simultaneously, at a boarding house near the train tracks, Kwame woke up. The smell of sewage and the roar of a train shook his senses. Imani was snoring on a mat beside him. Only an old, noisy fan was spinning. Kwame grabbed his phone. No messages or calls. He opened the bank app. Remaining balance, $300, enough to pay this month's boarding house rent and buy cheap food. There was an email notification from the Human Resources Department of his former company, a wrongful termination letter. He was now officially unemployed with a bad history. Kwame threw the phone onto the thin mattress. He stared blankly at the spiderweb-filled ceiling. He had nothing left. Back in the penthouse, Zola was on a video call with Amara. Amara, do you want to be the chief executive officer of our company? Zola exclaimed excitedly. What? CEO? Of what company? You just gave birth, Zola. Amara laughed from the other end. Of our company. I'm serious. My father will give us the capital. We're going to create our brand, Thorne Apparel. Amara was silent, then grinned from ear to ear. Ready for the job, Director? Zola laughed, hung up, and looked at Elias, who was sleeping in his luxurious crib. We're going to start, son, she whispered. She was no longer the weak Zola. She was Zola Thorne, mother and future businesswoman. 6 months passed. For Zola, they were 6 months in a fog, filled with diapers, meetings, business plans, sleepless nights for Elias, and sleepless nights designing. For Kwame and Imani, they were 6 months of a slow descent into hell. The boarding house Kwame had rented with the black market money he had left was a 10 by 13-foot cubicle near the train tracks. There was no air conditioning. A small window, when opened, let in the stench of a clogged sewer. The thin plywood walls let them hear every conversation, every fight, every sigh from the next room. Every 30 minutes, day and night, a train passed, making the whole building shake. Imani, who was once the queen of social gatherings, was now a shadow of herself. Her gold jewelry hidden in her girdle was sold one by one to buy food. Accustomed to being served, she now had to use a shared bathroom at the end of the hallway and do laundry by hand. That day, she sat in front of her room door next to the smelly sewer and began to scrub Kwame's sweaty clothes in a bucket with cheap detergent. Her hands, once soft, were now rough and sore. The soapy water stung her, and the stench turned her stomach. A neighbor, the lady from the salad stall, stopped. Doing laundry, Mrs. Imani? That's unusual. You always took it to the cleaners. Imani's face flushed. Just to get some exercise, she lied. The neighbor laughed. Exercise? Well, you look pretty miserable. Hey, you have to scrub your husband's work clothes with a brush, right? Like this. She threw her an old scrub brush. Imani felt humiliated to the core. Tears fell into the dirty water. She hated this. She hated the smell. She hated the neighbor. She hated Kwame. And above all, she hated Zola and her father. At a wholesale market, Kwame was loading sacks of potatoes. The man who was once a clean-shirted office worker was now a warehouse loader in an old, torn T-shirt. His body, once well-maintained, was now thin and sunburned. Blacklisted from all companies, the only job he could find was this. He was paid daily, $2 for each sack he moved from the truck to the stall. He worked from dawn. His back ached. His hands were full of blisters. Hey, Kwame, move faster. It's hard to believe that with how big you are, it takes you so long to move a sack, the foreman shouted at him. Kwame could only nod and quicken his pace. At the end of the afternoon, he received his pay. $75 in wrinkled bills that smelled of fish, enough to buy rice and instant noodles. In the past, $75 barely paid for 3 hours of parking at the mall. He walked home to save the bus money. He found his mother sitting in the dark. Their electricity had been cut off, and only one low-energy bulb was working. "How much did you bring?" Imani asked in a hoarse voice. Kwame threw the bills onto the mat. $75. Imani's eyes shone with disdain. "Only that? What have you been doing all day? That's not even enough for rice." "Yes, it is, Mom, if we save. If you stop asking me to buy you fabric softener that smells like flowers," Kwame exploded, fed up. "Do you think it's easy to earn money? My back is broken and my hands are ruined. And what do you do at home? Sit and complain." "I did the laundry," Imani shouted. "And I put up with the neighbors' humiliations. Mrs. Imani, humiliated by a salad vendor, and all because of you." "Because of me?" Kwame let out a bitter laugh. "Whose fault was it, Mom? Who was the greedy one? Who said, 'This is your reward, son'? Who said Zola was a cheap idiot?" Imani fell silent. "You!" Kwame yelled, pointing at her. "If you hadn't been so greedy, if we had given Zola even $500 out of the $7,500, she would have been happy, and we would still have had $7,000 a month. We could still be living comfortably, but you wanted it all. Greed, that's your sickness, not Zola's." A loud slap resonated in the room. Imani had hit him with all her might. "Ungrateful son," she gasped. "You blame your mother. It's all because you're a mama's boy. You didn't know how to control your wife. If you had been tougher with her from the beginning, Zola wouldn't have dared." Kwame touched his burning cheek. Something inside him broke. "Mama's boy?" he repeated. You made me this way. I didn't want to go to jail. And now I have nothing." They screamed, they insulted each other, they blamed each other. Their voices mixed with the roar of the train. There was no more love between mother and son, just two desperate beings, trapped in the karma they themselves had created. Tired of fighting, they fell silent, their stomachs growled. Kwame prepared 2 packets of instant noodles in an old pot. No egg, no vegetables, just noodles and the powder packet. They ate in silence. Suddenly, their attention focused on the room's only entertainment, an old 14-inch tube television they had bought for $20. Local news was on, with a segment about young entrepreneurs. "And our next inspiring figure is Ms. Zola Thorne," the presenter said. Kwame and Imani froze with their spoons in the air. Zola's face appeared on the screen. She looked different. She was still beautiful, but now she radiated a distinct aura. She wore a stylish blouse and a matching dusty pink scarf. She stood in front of a large, luxurious store with a big sign that read, "Thorne Apparel." "Yes, thank you." Zola's voice sounded clear and confident on the television. Thorne Apparel was born from my dream of offering comfortable, elegant, and modest clothing for young mothers. The camera showed the inside of the store, packed with high society clients clamoring for the clothing and premium baby items. "And to celebrate the opening of our first store," Zola continued, smiling at the camera, "we will be donating 10% of this month's profits to an orphanage." Crash! Imani had thrown her bowl of noodles at the old television. The screen flickered and went black. Ceramic shards and noodle broth scattered across the floor. "Shameless!" Imani screamed, her voice again surpassing the noise of the train. "She's showing off her wealth over our suffering, that witch!" Kwame didn't move. He stared blankly at the now black television screen. In his reflection, he saw his own face, haggard, thin, defeated, completely defeated. A year had passed since that day at the hospital. For those who build dreams, time flies. The penthouse, once strange, had become a warm home for Zola and Elias. Under the tutelage of Mr. Thorne, a strict but fair business mentor, Thorne Apparel grew at a dizzying pace. Zola's business plan had been brilliant. She didn't just sell clothes. She sold a story, a community. She built a brand image that understood young mothers. The quality was premium, but the prices remained accessible to the middle class. The result was explosive. In 1 year, Thorne Apparel opened stores in 5 luxury malls and established a production workshop that employed dozens of local seamstresses. Today was a special day, Elias's first birthday and Thorne Apparel's first anniversary. But the celebration didn't take place in a luxury hotel. True to her promise, Zola celebrated it elsewhere, a humble but clean community orphanage on the outskirts of the city. The orphanage courtyard was decorated with balloons. Dozens of orphaned children sat neatly, their eyes shining at the sight of the gift boxes and a huge birthday cake. Elias, who was already crawling, laughed happily in his grandfather, Mr. Thorne's lap. Zola climbed onto a small stage, dressed in a simple but elegant white dress from her latest collection. Her face was serene and radiant. "Hello, everyone," she said in a soft voice. "Today, I'm not here as the CEO of Thorne Apparel. I'm here as Zola, a mother and a daughter." She smiled at her father. "A year ago, my son Elias was born, and his birth was a new dawn in my life. He taught me the meaning of strength. I want Elias to learn that true happiness doesn't lie in how much we own, but in how much we can share. That's why, in gratitude for his first birthday and for Thorne Apparel's first year, my father and I have decided to fund the complete renovation of this orphanage and establish a foundation to guarantee the schooling expenses of all these children until they finish high school." A thunderous applause erupted. The orphanage director, a nun, cried with emotion. The children screamed with joy. Mr. Thorne, with Elias in his arms, clapped the loudest. He looked at his daughter with misty eyes. Not only had she succeeded, she had become a great person. As Zola descended from the stage and picked up Elias, the phone Amara held vibrated. Amara looked at it and approached Zola. "Zola," she whispered amid the bustle. "There's news." Zola turned. "What news, Amara?" Amara hesitated for a moment. "Karma news." Zola frowned. Amara showed her the phone screen. There were 2 messages. The first was from her father's legal team. "An arrest has been made at a small courier company. Kwame N. has been detained for embezzling $2,000 in company funds. He is currently in police custody." $2,000. Zola smiled bitterly. Before, it was hundreds of thousands. Now he had fallen for 2,000. With no skills other than fraud, Kwame had tried to repeat his crime on a smaller, clumsier scale, and he had been caught. Then, Amara slid the screen to the second message, received minutes earlier from the concierge of her old building. "Miss Amara, there was a commotion in the community. An elderly woman was caught stealing clothes from a clothesline in Block C. When she was caught, she started screaming hysterically. It was Mrs. Zola's former mother-in-law, Mrs. Imani. She was haggard and unrecognizable. The police took her away. The queen of social gatherings who boasted about designer bags, now a thief of clothes from a clothesline. Karma had arrived in the most ironic way possible. With Kwame's arrest, Imani had lost her only source of income. However miserable, hunger had overcome her pride." Zola stared at the phone screen for a long time. "Are you okay, Zola?" Amara asked. Zola took a deep breath. She didn't feel an explosion of triumph or a desire to celebrate. What she felt was relief, the liberation from a heavy burden she had unknowingly carried for a long time. The chapter was finally closed by destiny. She locked the screen and handed the phone back to Amara. "I'm fine," she said. "Rather, I feel free." She turned around. There were no longer shadows of the past in her gaze. In front of her, Elias laughed, extending his little hands toward the birthday cake. Her father smiled at her. "Come on, daughter. It's time to blow out the candles," Mr. Thorne said. Zola nodded, approached her son, took him in her arms, and kissed his chubby cheek. She stood next to her father, surrounded by the laughter of the orphanage children. "Happy birthday, my love," she whispered to Elias. Zola closed her eyes for an instant and said a prayer of gratitude. Then she opened them, smiled, and along with Elias, blew out the single candle on the cake. The flame went out, leaving only the light of her new dawn. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.